Hello, everyone. Welcome to NVMe Virtual Plugfest number 15 webinar. My name is Kerry Munson. I am the Operations Manager for the Data Center Technologies at the University of New Hampshire's Interoperability Lab. I'm joined today by Tim Sheehan, Technical Manager of the Data Center Technologies. We will be discussing both NVMe and NVMe over Fabrics, testing and updates. As well as a new Zoned NameSpace test offering. We will be discussing next month's Plugfest. The Plugfest, as mentioned here, will be virtual, so there will be changes from our traditional Plugfest that we will get into. If at all during this presentation you have questions, please feel free to drop them into the Q&A box, and David Wolf will be addressing those at the end. For those of you not familiar with the IOL, we are a third-party test lab. Our workforce consists of over 100 graduate and undergraduate students, as well as 30 full-time staff. This is a great opportunity for the University of New Hampshire CSITE folks that are interested in working in the industry. They get that 4 years of experience before going out and getting jobs working alongside engineers like yourselves. The IOL has been working with the NVMe org since 2012. So next year will be our 10-year with them. It's been a great opportunity for us. We've been managing their integrators list and holding approximately 2 Plugfests per year over the last 9 years for them. So as I said, Plugfest 15 will be virtual, and this will occur the week of June 14th through 18th. Traditionally, we have had 2 events, one where we test NVMe SSDs, and the following week, NVMe over Fabrics products. So initiators, targets, switches for different transports such as fiber channel, Rocky, or TCP. But because we are virtual, we're combining our NVMe and NVMe over Fabrics teams together to help with the testing. So that's why it looks like there's only one event, but please know that this is still going to be for both NVMe and NVMe over Fabrics. This event will be following the version 15 test plan, and we will be conducting both conformance and interoperability testing. And the primary purpose of this event is to qualify products for the NVMe integrators list, which can be found right on our website. This testing will be solely performed by IOL staff. Unfortunately, we are not able to have visitors as of yet, but hopefully maybe in the fall or next year, we will be able to welcome people back to our lab. So this is the agenda we will be discussing today. First off will be the integrators list, and then I will hand it off to Tim Sheehan, and he will be able to talk about the test plan 15 updates, as well as the IOL Interact test tools. And then I will close it out talking about shipping logistics. We'll wrap everything up, and then as I mentioned, David Wolf will be answering your questions. As of today, there are 282 products on the NVMe integrators list and 82 NVMe over Fabrics products on the integrators list. To be clear, the Fabrics integrators list has Rocky, fiber channel, and TCP products on it. We do plan on adding iWarp as well, but as of today, it is only those other 3 transports. So the NVMe integrators list will accept PCIe drives, host platforms, and switches. And the NVMe integrators list will accept Rocky, TCP, fiber channel, and iWarp initiators, targets, and switches. Here are the requirements for version 15.0's integrators list. The SSDs must pass conformance for PC edition, conformance for LaCroix edition, and then do a series of I/O tests for interoperability. And the device will have to pass 5 of the 6 NVMe host platforms. If your product happens to be a U.2 form factor, it will have to go through hot plug testing as well. And then if your product supports NVMe MI, there will be an additional NVMe MI conformance test done with the LaCroix test tool. And if it qualifies, it will be added to the integrators list under that column. To clarify, the NVMe MI integrators list used to be broken out, but we have made it into one list, but with an extra column that says which specification the drive supports for MI. And then requirements for PC host platforms and switches, they just have to test Interop with 5 NVMe SSDs. The NVMe OF integrators list requirements are listed here. So for the initiators and hosts, Interop testing will need to be done against 2 targets. And then for targets and subsystems, the same thing. It will have to pass Interop testing with 2 host Interop partners. And then there are additional conformance testing. So there's NVMe protocol conformance, and then there's NVMe OF protocol conformance testing. So it's 2 different sets of conformance testing, but they are both required. Integrators list information. Before the event, it may be helpful if you are able to provide the following information for your product. This will also be added onto the test reports. So for the PCIe integrators list, these are the different columns that we have: product name and firmware version, product type, NVMe spec supported firmware, form factor, and PCIe generation. If you are unaware of what will be added to the integrators list right off the bat, that's okay. You can let us know after the testing is completed when you are ready for the product to be listed. It just makes it easier to get the information ahead of time, but we are flexible and we understand if you don't have that available. And then same thing for the fabrics integrators list. We need product name, product type, and then the software version, kernel version, or port types. And again, if you provide us a pre-production name for the Plugfest testing, but have a different name for the integrators list, we will work with you to get the proper information to be listed.
Great. Thanks, Kerry. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the discussion of NVMe and NVMe OF test plans, as well as the IOL Interact toolset. I'm Tim Sheehan, Technical Manager here at the IOL and the Data Center Group. please feel free to add your questions into the Q&A, and anything you have for questions about this NVMe Virtual Plugfest webinar number 15 will get answered. So let's talk about test plan 15. So as most of you know, but maybe some don't, updates happen at least twice a year, major updates to our test plan suite. This happens within the NVMe.org's Interop and Compliance Committee, or ICC for short. The ICC meets every other Tuesday afternoon, Eastern time, to discuss the test plans, to combine and come up with the different technical proposals as well as ECNs that come out of NVMe.org to come up with these new test plans. And then once the test plans are created, they're voted on by the technical work group in NVMe.org, as well as the board of directors. It's one of the reasons why the test plan 15 took so long, as the board was still voting on the test plans. So, but we did get them up. They are now up on our website at the iol.unh.edu. You can see them there under NVMe and then test plans. And then, as Kerry mentioned, there's a new test plan that's out there right now that was just created, Zoned NameSpace, or ZNS for short. And again, you could see the actual link there as to where you could go and take a look at this new test plan. So let's talk about some of the changes that are happening inside test plan number 15. As Kerry mentioned, you know, we're testing towards these test plans in order for everybody's product to get on the integrators list, the NVMe.org's integrators list, for these different transports, PCI, fiber channel, Rocky, iWarp, and TCP. Each time we have a major rev of the test plans, we go through and add in all the ECNs and TPs, as I mentioned before, into the new test plan. But other things happen also. Tests that were FYI to start, that were FYI from a previous test plan or Plugfest, if we've had enough vendors' products and we've been able to vet out issues that happened within the actual test procedures as well as the test applications, and enough devices under test or DUTs actually perform the test appropriately, then the tests are moved from the FYI status to a mandatory. And that's what I'm showing here in the middle of this slide. In test plan number 15, you've got 3 different NVMe OF tests that went from FYI to mandatory. So there are 3 more tests that you need to pass in order to get onto the integrators list. And then on the PCI side, there are 47 tests that went from FYI to mandatory. So quite a few. There are 24 tests that had modifications, and there are 34 brand new tests that are happening inside test plan 15. And then down below, the NVMe OF conformance test plan also has 2 tests that went from FYI to mandatory. And I believe that was 132, which is a get properties test, as well as test case 321, which is keep alive timeout. Now, where does the information come from in order to create these test plans? Well, for test plan 15, it came from these technical proposals that came out of NVMe.org. The first one, 4009, is domains and partitions. It is there are 4 new tests for this particular area, and this is basically modifications to some of the get and set feature commands and the values that apply to namespaces as well as namespace IDs. 4 tests will be there. The next one is technical proposal 4040, which is the non-MDDS. There are 9 tests for this one. It's checking out different size limits for commands that don't actually transfer data, such as write zeros. So you'd be doing the write 0 size limit, write uncorrectable size limit. And there are probably 4 different areas there, but there are 9 new tests for this particular TP. The third one is TP 4056, which is namespace types. There are 12 new tests here. So this is the big one that came out for this particular test plan that has the most changes in it today. And the last one is TP 4078, which is testing out limits for the maximum domain namespace attachment as well as controller namespace attachment. Now, the best place to see exactly what has changed and what test procedure or case has changed is to look at the modification record that's at the top of each one of our test plans. It is very good practice to look at this because it's going to tell you what has changed for each one of the Plugfests whenever we have a new Plugfest come out. And again, major test plans come out twice a year and they correspond with the Plugfest as well as the IOL Interact software major releases. So we're going into Plugfest 15. It's going to work with Test Plan 15 as well as IOL Interact version 15. So these are the TPs primarily, and there are some other tests that definitely were added in or modifications to Test Plan 15 based off of feedback that we've had from testing. So some areas that didn't really change, other than the 2 tests that went from FYI to mandatory, none of the actual procedure steps or results steps have actually changed in the NVMe over fabrics conformance test. The NVMe Interop for PCI as well as over fabrics, there were no changes there. And the MI test plan also had no changes. So these are areas that you don't have to be concerned with, at least, other than obviously making sure that your particular product tests well against them. There were no new additions or subtractions for that matter, or modifications for these test plans. And now I'd like to just switch a little bit and talk about the tools that we use to perform these tests. And that is the IOL Interact test tool. So Plugfest 15 is also going to introduce a new application as part of the IOL Interact test tool. It is the Zoned NameSpace test application, and ZNS for short. And this is only going to be available on version 15 of the IOL Interact, or the latest version that we just released. The actual ZNS application will be released in about a week or 2. We're just finishing up the last QA on it and making sure that it's ready for you and for the Plugfest. All of the tests that come out as part of this ZNS application will be FYI, because all of the tests that are in the actual test plan are FYI, since it's a brand new test plan. There will be a ZNS field. It won't be an actual integrators list. It will be a field that will be on the integrators list as part of what is on the IOL website today. And again, the IOL Interact ZNS application will be based on the SPDK driver and will support Zone Append. So brand new application coming out. It will be another field in the integrators list for ZNS support. We're hoping to get some ZNS products in to test, and that way we'd be able to move the actual ZNS test plan forward from FYI to mandatory. And we're hoping to have somewhere in the order of 25 to 30 tests available for the actual Plugfest. So that's what's happening new besides test plan 15 changes that are in the IOL Interact. But one I put in this slide because I'd like to talk to everybody about things that are going to happen after the Plugfest. And I know this is a Plugfest webinar, but there are some pretty big things that are happening after the Plugfest, and I just wanted to make sure you're aware of them. They're probably not going to be happening for at least 2 to 3 months out, maybe towards the end of the summer. But we will be changing it around our RLM license server. It'll be a cloud-based product, or it can have a local server that you can install in your particular company. Again, these aren't happening. These are happening after the Plugfest and will happen more towards the end of summer. We'll also be upgrading IOL Interact to the Ubuntu 20.04 operating system and whatever appropriate kernel we test with at that point that works with NVMe CLI. And we'll be updating the NVMe CLI too, that makes appropriate choices based off of the functionality we need. And then we just heard this week that the UNH is actually getting rid of the box location. So we'll have a new way of actually releasing the software to you, our customer base, along with release notes each time we have a new release. So again, major releases happen twice a year, and we also have minor releases that happen in between them. Now, how do you get that IOL Interact PC Edition software? Well, you join one of the IOL member groups that are dealing with NVMe or NVMe OF. Kerry will then send you a licensing agreement that you need to fill out. Once you get that, we will send you the actual link to the box utility so that you're able to download the software. Then someone would also send you from the IOL the license itself today. And then you just follow the installation documentation that we have. Now, for someone who hasn't actually run the IOL Interact yet, or maybe you're brand new and don't know what it's all about and like to see it, there is a demo version available. It runs the first test in each one of the groups that are in the test plan. You can take a look at the latest and greatest test plan for that. So it shows you what the other tests are, but only allows you to run the first one in the first particular test case in each group, so that you can get an idea of how the product actually works and how it logs things, the information it gives you and the testing that it performs. So that's how you're going to be able to get the actual product itself. If you did have any issues with the product, obviously we'd like to hear about it so that we can resolve it. Because as many of you know, but maybe someone who's brand new does not know, a lot of times the features that are being put into the test plan, as well as the IOL Interact software, are so brand new that there are no devices to test against, or very limited devices to test against. And that's why we have Plugfest, as well as testing that happens throughout the year. So we want to make sure that we can vet all of the issues that are coming out with not only the test plan, not only the IOL Interact software, but also your device under test. So you could report these issues through the actual IOL login, My IOL, down at the very bottom. And whenever you do that, it will be assigned a JIRA bug number. We use JIRA as our bug tracking system, and we use Git Bitbucket for source control. We also apply all the agile methods of development, scrums, bug processing meetings, and reviews to make sure that we can vet as many of the issues from the product as possible, as well as when the next minor or major release comes out, we'll have release notes that would actually have the actual JIRA issues in that so that you can see what issues were addressed, and hopefully yours was fixed in that next release. As we mentioned already, you have 2 major releases a year that correspond with the actual Plugfest and the test plan releases, but we also have monthly or 4 to 6 week releases of minor releases that have primarily bug fixes, but could be some newer features. So again, 2 releases a year based off of the NVMe.org's test plan that comes out. We use agile processes. Today, we're actually shipping on Ubuntu 18.04 with kernel 5.5.10. And we have started in the last year and a half using Python 3 to write most of our scripts. And at this point, NVMe CLI, we're using 2 slightly different versions. For the PCI product, we use 1.10.1, and for Fabrics, we use 1.10.1.22. These are both shipped with the product, so you don't have to worry about it. It's just for your education to understand what it is we're using. And then, of course, it is compliant. All of our releases that we support right now are compliant to the 1.4 specification that comes out of the NVMe.org. So I had to put this slide in only because I think we've had it in every webinar possible. But when you're doing PCI interop testing, these are the systems that you'll be performing that interop against. And your DUT needs to be able to, or your SSD needs to be able to successfully pass the interop tests on at least 5 of these platforms. So we put it here just so that you can see it every time. You're able to see if there's any changes. I don't think there were any changes from the last Plugfest back in November, but wanted to make sure you saw all the systems that we have that will be used to perform, PCI interop at this Plugfest. So I've talked to you a little bit about test plans. We've talked about the IOL Interact tool. We've talked about new ZNS test plans and ZNS applications coming. A lot of new work happening, as well as all the changes for that test plan 15. Lots of good stuff. We're really excited about the Plugfest 15 that's coming up. And at this point, I'd like to pass it back to Kerry, who will, wrap it up and start talking about logistics, shipping, as well as summary, and then we'll jump into the QA session.
Thanks, Tim. So logistics this time around is going to be very similar to past Plugfest. For NVMe products, we do require at least 2 samples of each product. We will need 2 samples to run the interop testing. If you are able to send more than that, even better. Chances are sometimes we could test in parallel, or if one of the devices is malfunctioning, we will have a backup device. It's not required, but if you are able to send extra samples, it's a little bit of peace of mind. Please make sure that the products are received by Friday, June 11th, so the Friday before the event begins. This is so that we are able to get started right away on Monday morning. Any cabling you need to work your device or adapters, we will need as well. And then if your product needs any login for SSDs, probably not, but just in case. And then please provide a packing list of your items in your shipment. Because you will not be attending this event, we will be sending it back to you, and we just want to double check to make sure that we are sending back everything you sent us. And going to call out PCI extender cards. Sometimes we don't quite have enough around. It's a little different, it being a virtual event, but if your device needs it, it's just safer to include it. So we'd appreciate that. And then for shipping of fabrics products, please make sure that the products are received a week before. We will be setting up the devices a little bit early so that we can make sure testing starts right on time. And make sure your solution is installed and working in a host when you ship it to us. If you're able to get it up and going and it works well, pack it up, send it to us, and we should be able to get it up and going just as well. There will be no large build at this event, just because we won't have the attendees there to work together. Unfortunately, hopefully next time we have an in-person event, we could do another large build. Those are pretty exciting. And then again, packing list of all your items to make sure that we get everything back that you sent us. Please provide all the cabling, transceivers, whatever you need to make the product work. And then fabrics testing may take longer than 1 week. So it is important to make sure your device is working when we get it so that time debugging is minimized. However, if there is a problem that does come up, we can resolve it through email, Zoom calls. We'll work with you through time zones, whatever we need to have happen. And we can provide remote internet access to your product if needed. So we will do our best to get the testing done and the results to you as quick as possible. The registration will be closing on June 1st, and the device schedule will be made after the registration closes. Reports will be provided July 9th, so that should give us about 2 weeks to collect all the data and create the reports and send those off. Then once the reports are sent out, we will ship back all the devices. And if you choose to have your product added to the integrators list and it qualifies, we will update the list at that time. If you choose not to add your product to the integrators list right away and it does qualify, that's fine. Just let us know when you would like it added. Some people like to have that updated around the product's launch, and that's perfectly fine. So, summary. ICC calls happen every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern. Brian Holmquist from Intel is the chair of the Interop and Compliance Committee. If you have any questions or would like to follow updates to the test plan, they can be done through the ICC. And I just want to give a shout out to our partners. These companies here have provided our test events lots of support in the past, and sadly they're unable to join us at this event, but hopefully we will have the opportunity to have them back in future events. And our registration is right on our website. There is a link right here. Again, registration closes for Fabrics and PCIe devices on June 1st. So it's about 2 weeks ahead. Actually, it's exactly 2 weeks ahead of the event. And registration limits, 2 unique products may be registered. If there are additional products, they will be waitlisted. If there is room in the schedule and you have a 3rd or 4th product, I will contact you after to let you know if we can add it to the schedule. And then again, no attendees will be permitted to attend this event. All right, be prepared. If you are a member, download the test tools and run them. If you're not a member, please reach out to me and I will help you getting membership so that you can get a hold of the test tools. Running these tools before the event will just make things a whole lot easier on you. The download is from our box site that Kim mentioned earlier, but we will need a licensing agreement before I can provide the license. There are 10 seats of the Interact license per membership. If your company has used up all of your seats, let me know and I can work with you to get you an additional licensing package. It's pretty easy, but I do want you to know that those are available. So, quick summary, Virtual Plugfest. Ship everything that we will need, and we will send everything back as soon as the testing is completed. The event may last longer than a week, especially for Fabrics. It'll probably be 2 weeks for Fabrics, maybe even a bit longer. Troubleshooting will be coordinated upon approval. If there are firmware updates that are needed to be done, that may be limited due to our reduced resources. So again, please make sure you run the testing beforehand, just to make sure that this situation does not come up. And then if your product does not pass, we can schedule a test reservation after the Plugfest to qualify for the version 15.0 integrators list. So no worries if you don't pass, we'll get you there. And again, this is for integrators list testing only. There will be no time slots with the test and measurement companies, as I mentioned before. And then the products will be added to the integrators list, hopefully by Friday, July 8th. And that will be once all the reports have been issued and testing is completed. All right, so here's Tim and my contact information. Please let us know if you have any questions. But I am going to turn it over to David Wolf to answer any questions that you had throughout the presentation.
All right, thanks, Kerry, and thanks everyone who sent in questions. We've got a handful here. I'll address them as best I can. I've typed answers into the chat for those that are following, or into the Q&A window for those that are following along there, but I'll answer them here as well, and I'll try and keep my eyes open to see if any other questions come in the meantime. The first question, I didn't quite understand what was being asked. It was whether there's support for a ZNS day. Obviously, we didn't do a demo of the ZNS tests. We're continuing to work on those at the IOL. If you can clarify that question, I might be able to provide didn't have a demo of the ZNS tests planned for today. The first question was about, or the next question rather, was about whether TP 4053A is incorporated into the next release. So if you're not familiar, TP 4053A is the ZNS specification. It's really a separate doc from the NVMe base specification. And we've posted a test plan specific to that document up on our website. So you can go and look at that. And if you are a member of the NVMe organization, that same document has been going through the ratification process there. So if you are following that, there's not really any changes in the one that we posted yesterday. As far as the tests and implementations of that, there is some complexity there to be aware of, and why this is kind of a heavy lift for us at the IOL to support the ZNS tests. As you may know, many of our tests, most of the tests in fact, leverage the inbox NVMe driver and then put test functionality on top of that. And that gains you a lot in terms of a reliable foundation and interoperability and things like that. Of course, it has limited capability. And currently, the inbox NVMe driver with the Linux kernel doesn't support the zone append command, which is, of course, an important part of the ZNS specification. So we're leveraging the SPDK driver. I think a lot of folks are probably familiar with that. But that switch has certainly cost us some time. And so we're planning to continue to expand the number of tests we have integrated right into the test tool that support ZNS as we get closer to the Plugfest. The next question was with respect to NVMe MI. For folks that perform the NVMe MI tests in their own lab, and of course the ones we perform at UNH, we use the Teledyne LaCroix tool that supports NVMe MI over SM bus. And the question is just, how are the LaCroix test packages, or the LaCroix MI test packages, matched with the MI test plans? And basically the way that works, when we make updates to the test plan, that goes through the whole NVMe process to ratify a document. And once that's ratified, and I do most of the edits on that, me and the team at UNH, we'll pass that off to the team at LaCroix, and they'll handle the implementation. And so they follow that document quite closely. So we work together on that. If you see issues where you think there's not matched or there's a mismatch, definitely we want to know about that. So send that to our way at UNH or at LaCroix. We communicate with that team pretty regularly. There's a question about, is there a way to view known issues for current versions of the test software? So aside from what we put in the user's guide with each release, we don't have a public way to share reported issues. And there's some reasons for that. And I'm very interested to hear feedback on it, but let me explain the reasons first. We may have a company running the test and reports an issue with the test. And that comes in and we put it into our bug tracking process so that it gets worked on. Certainly there's some feedback with whoever reported the bug. We really can't share all of that information publicly because initially we don't know if that bug that's being reported is an issue with someone's product or if it's an issue with the tool. And there would be some confidentiality concerns about kind of cleaning up that information. So that's why we don't do that directly. And you can imagine that the effort to kind of sanitize everything that came in and then post it publicly would be quite complicated and quite time consuming to do that. That said, right now at the IOL, we're working on implementing basically a help desk feature on our website. And that certainly would allow you the capability to track any bugs that you reported a little bit easier than what we have today. We're also looking at if we can use that to share certain pieces of information about other bugs that are being tracked. And to give you a little better window into known issues. I don't have all the answers there, but we're looking at some third-party software to help us do that and improve what we're doing there. I'd be very interested to hear feedback there on what you've seen work in other places with respect to tracking known issues. Another question, is a different license needed for the version 15 tools than the version 14 tools? No, there's nothing about switching from 14 to 15 that's going to require a new license. As long as your license is current, that should work. And a question from someone who happens to be relatively local to us up in New Hampshire. Can I drop off and then pick up equipment? I want to double check what UNH's requirements are on that. And also, if there's any other local or state requirements on that. I don't necessarily see a problem, but I do want to double check that, make sure we're following any kind of health and safety restrictions we have at UNH. And of course, that may change between now and June as well. Okay, so there was one more question here about what other changes are needed on the host side to test the ZNS drive. Is installing the UNH software take care of it, or do I need to do some kernel-related change? Good question. And previously I described how kind of the regular compliance tests for NVMe base specification leverage the inbox kernel driver, and then these ZNS tests are leveraging the SPDK driver. So we're building the functionality for doing that switch into the tool. So we don't expect folks who are installing the tool to then also have to uninstall a driver and reinstall another driver. We're going to build the capability for doing that switch right into the tool. So it should be seamless. We actually had that functionality previously. If you were familiar with our tool, I think prior to version 13 or perhaps version 12, there was some test capability that we needed a different driver for at that time called DNVMe, if you want an NVMe history lesson. And we had some of that functionality for switching drivers, and we're looking to repurpose that for popping between the kernel driver, the regular kernel driver, and the SPDK driver. So there shouldn't be any extra work there. That was all the questions. So thank you for those. If there's anything else, of course, feel free to reach out to myself or Kerry or Tim. Other questions about the Plugfest. Thanks for everybody who joined today. And I'll hand it back to Kerry to wrap us up.
Thanks, David. Everyone that registered for today's webinar will be emailed a link to the presentation later on this week. If you have any other questions, as David mentioned, let us know. And thank you very much for joining us. And we hope to talk to you soon. Bye.